Good evening. Welcome to the Bradford County Historical Society and Friday night at the museum. A few announcements before we begin. Our book that's on sale this month is the 1858 Atlas of Bradford County, which is out there and 20% off. So Tom can help you with that afterwards if you're interested in picking one of those up. Again, the museum is open Wednesday through Friday, 10 to 4, and on Saturday, the first Saturday of the month from 10 to 2. So stop by and visit. Also, the library upstairs is open the same hours, so we encourage you to stop in and take advantage of those things. Friday night at the museum this month is a special program on Cortez Jennings and his life and legacy in Bradford County, so we've been looking forward to this. And Michelle Knight is our speaker this evening, so I'll invite her to come at this time. There you go.
Thanks, Matt. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I'm really excited to give this presentation. If I'm not loud enough, just kind of raise your hand because I'll talk a little louder. Kind of short with the microphone here. Introduce myself. My name is Michelle Knight. I am the great-granddaughter of Cortez Hicks Jennings, who we are going to be speaking, great-great-granddaughter, who we're going to be speaking about tonight. Couple little announcements. We'll have questions, time for questions after I give the presentation, so just kind of hold them till that point. Otherwise, we're going to zip through this. There's 83 slides up here, so there's a lot of content to cover. We're going to get started here. Okay, so my family lineage, to go back in time here, Cortez Hicks Jennings and Mary Molly Bowman Jennings are my great-great-grandparents. Their son, Paul Bishop Jennings, who grew up here in Towanda, is my great-grandfather. He's here on the right-hand side. And my grandmother was Mary Alice Molly Hawk Jennings, right here below. And then my mother here in the audience, Nancy Bomboy, was Molly's daughter. And my daughter here, Molly, you can raise your hand. Lots of Mollys in the family, that's right, lots of Mollys in the family. In fact, Molly is named after my grandmother Molly, who was named after her grandmother Molly. So we've got the whole line of Mollys going on here. We're going to kind of talk about the history of the family a little bit before we get into kind of the Towanda-Bradford County connection, so kind of stay with me here. Cortez Jennings' grandfather, Paul Bishop Jennings, came to America from England around 1811, made his way to Jim Thorpe as a log transporter and a lumber wholesale dealer. Eventually, he bought a grist mill and a sawmill and some acreage in Wyoming County. This was kind of the beginning of the family's lumbering tradition. Cortez, his father, William N. Jennings, began lumbering there with his brother Joseph T. Jennings in 1852. They built a sawmill and purchased 2,000 acres of land there. 1856, just north of Mahoopany, the town of Jenningsville is named after the brothers. Still there, very small. Other Jennings family members started their own businesses there and doing logging in Wyoming County, one of which is still there today, Deer Park Lumber in Tunkhannock. Cortez was born to William Navarre Jennings and Sarah Ann Hicks Jennings in Jenningsville near Mahoopany, 1855. He attended the public schools of Pittston, a private school in Wilkes-Barre, and Wyoming Seminary in Kingston. He went on to study at Millersville University and then Claverack College up in Hudson, New York. He then moved to Wilkes-Barre, where his father was doing business, and began learning the family trade of lumbering. 1875, Cortez becomes the captain of a passenger steamboat that traveled on the Susquehanna from Wilkes-Barre to Nanticoke. He was the youngest captain, holding a government license at the time, and he worked under A.B. Mott of Tunkhannock, a very famous captain there. He takes the West Point Academy entrance exam, where he receives an appointment in the spring of 1876. He's a top contender of 18 who took the exam, and he won the appointment by the local entrance committee. 3 years into his appointment there, he was accused of cheating and resigned in 1879. Well, later on, they proved that he was not cheating, and the academy asked him to return. And they issued him a one-of-a-kind ring to say sorry to him. It was a wax sealing ring that the family still owns. Again, one of a kind. I don't have it here, but we still have it. He decides instead to decline the offer to come back to West Point and goes out to McKean County, Pennsylvania, where his father had purchased some tracts of land to lumber out there. Cortez managed the company and the office out there until he moved back east. He marries his first wife, Florence Mott of Tunkhannock, in 1880. Cortez worked for her father, as I said before, Captain Mott. Unfortunately, she dies quickly after in 1883 of tuberculosis. They don't have any kids. 1881, Cortez purchases a tract of timber near Lopez and opens his first mill and sawmill, his first camp and sawmill, excuse me. His brother, Bishop Worth Jennings, joined him in business there and took ownership of the company. His other brother, William L. Jennings, would later work for the company in every capacity, including foreman, all the way up to mill superintendent. So this was a very family-oriented business, obviously. Here's a photo of the first lumber camp outside of Lopez, 1885. Pretty rugged and rustic looking. They do get better in time. His brother, Bishop Worth Jennings, known as Worth or BW, was born in West Pittston, May 4th, 1862. He also attended Wilkes-Barre Public Schools and Wyoming Seminary, and then he attended Bloomsburg Normal School, which is now Bloomsburg University, so a very educated family. At age 17, he began to work in his father's offices out in McKean County, learning the family business of lumbering. While he's out there in McKean County, he meets his wife, Ella Castle, and they marry on December 5th, 1883 in Jamestown, New York, where she is from. They have 3 children, William Worth Jennings Sr., Ethel May Jennings, and Helen Jennings. Here's a photo of BW in 1897. This is his photo from when he was a state representative in Harrisburg, and we'll get into that a little more in a minute. And there's his wife, Ella, also known as Nell, in 1895. BW served as the junior owner of the Jennings Brothers Lumber Company. He was very active in Lopez, appointed postmaster as well as justice of the peace. He was very supportive of public schools in Sullivan County, helping to build the one in Lopez, and he was also the school board president of Lopez. He was the Republican Party leader in Sullivan County and won the general election in November 1894 for the PA House of Representatives, served 2 terms, 1895 to 1898. Then with an investment from the Jennings Brothers Lumber Company, BW became the president of the First National Bank of Dewshore, which no longer exists. A little bit about Cortez's home life. In September of 1885, he gets remarried to Towanda native Mary Molly Louise Bowman, which is the connection here and why he makes his way back to Towanda. She was working with her stepmother and her brother in one of the lumber camps out in Sullivan County when she met Cortez. Lucky her, right? They have 3 children, Donald Hicks Jennings, who dies a year into existence here, Sarah Hicks Jennings Kaiser, and Paul Bishop Jennings, who is my great-grandfather. Here's a photo of Molly Jennings. Molly's mother was Jane Gregg Bowman, a descendant of early pioneer Andrew Gregg, an Irishman who settled and cleared the Towanda Hills up in North Towanda. He was a private in Sullivan's expedition in 1779 and is buried over at Riverside Cemetery. Her father, on the other hand, was Harry Bowman, who was a descendant of early pioneers Jacob Bowman and Mary Fox, whose family settled the Towanda Flats. Rudolph Fox was the first permanent settler, Bradford County, as most of you know, and was Molly's great-great-grandfather. That'll come into play a little bit later in the story when we find out about the farm and where it was located. Here's a photo of Jane Gregg Bowman and Molly as a child, 1870 in Towanda. 1887, the Jennings Brothers Lumber Company built a second mill on the Loyalsock Creek in Lopez. At its peak, the mill could top over 100,000 board foot per day, which you're all saying, what does that mean? A board foot is a square foot, 12 inches by 12 inches and 1 inch thick. So 100,000 board foot is a lot back then. They employed about 400 to 600 men at any given time, actually men and women. 1894, they bring the first electricity to Sullivan County. That is a big deal. 1895, they purchased a third mill in Lopez on the other side of town. So at this point, they've got 3 different mills going on. We estimate, you know, we have to guesstimate, I should say, they own about 20 to 30,000 acres of land in Sullivan County, mostly where State Game Land 66 is, around Dutch Mountain. Here's a photo of their hemlock mill. It's right on the Loyalsock Creek. You can see the log pond in the foreground where they would float the logs into the mill to cut them. Here's a picture of their third mill, the hardwood mill, where they cut all the hardwood. This was their third and final mill in Lopez. A little snippet from a history book, History of Sullivan County, 1899. Thomas Ingham says, the Jennings plant is one of the most complete and largest of its kind in this section of the country. They own over 150 houses occupied by their men, and in fact, everything used by the concern is theirs. Their homes are models of comfort and convenience, and the brothers are public spirited, energetic, progressive, generous, kind-hearted, and in fact possess all the qualities that go to make businessmen successful and popular. Here's a little snippet of some news articles from the Sullivan Review, 1894 and 1896. Jennings Brothers have contracted for an electric light plant for their mills, shops, store, and residence. This is the first electric light in Sullivan County. We wish they lived in Dewshore. Here's a photo of some of the family members in front of one of the trains that hauled the lumber in Lopez. You've got Cortez here on the left, Molly Jennings here on the right. Here's BW, his younger brother, and Nell Jennings. A couple other Jennings in the foreground. They all look very similar, obviously. Not only did they own and lumber timber, they also had all sorts of enterprises in Lopez. They had a large general store that they sold goods. They built 13 miles of railroad throughout the whole area to haul the lumber back into the mill. They owned the Lopez Manufacturing Company that used some of the scraps to make clothespins, broom handles, curtain rods. They owned a blacksmith shop, kindling factory, along with a pine shingle, hardwood flooring, and siding company. Here's a little ad from the LaPorte Republican newspaper in 1902, advertising their hardwood flooring. Here's a photo on the left of their general store. It's quite large. The family actually is up on the second floor here standing for the photo. I'm assuming 4th of July or something here with the flag hanging. Here is a photo of the railroad in the woods that they built 13 miles all throughout Lopez. Cortez is actually standing on the log there in the middle, just to give a reference there, 1893. Both brothers were very athletic and loved baseball, and they played against various teams throughout the whole area. I found tons of newspaper articles of them playing against different baseball teams. BW was the captain of the Lopez team, and he gained a wide reputation, only losing 1 game in 2 seasons while he was captain. That was a big deal back then. He was an exceptionally fast runner, winning numerous races at events in Lopez and other towns. And here is a photo of the Monroe-Burness Baseball Association, 1886. And you've got, let's see, BW is standing right here, and Cortez is standing right here. The rest of the folks, I don't know. After logging nearly everything in the area around Lopez, the company decides to expand outside of Pennsylvania. 1899, they secured about 6,000 to 9,000 acres of timber in Garrett County, Maryland. And between 1899 and 1904, they purchased upward of 65,000 acres in Tucker, Pocahontas, and Randolph counties in West Virginia. I've got a map here for reference of the area where they were logging. You've got Tucker County right here, Randolph, I think it's Randolph, yep, Randolph right there, and then you've got Pocahontas, that's all in West Virginia, and then Garrett County, Maryland is right there. Here's a photo zoomed in, and you can see a red star right here. This is where Jenningston was located, where they lumbered. And then you see another red star up here in Garrett County, Maryland, where Jennings, Maryland, that they established was. They were very busy. They established charters for the operations and built a lumber railroad that connected with the B&O Railroad in their Maryland business. Cortez was the primary manager of this operation until his son, Paul Bishop Jennings, would take over. Logging under Jennings Brothers would conclude in Maryland around 1918. Here's a photo of the church that they built there. And you can see the land behind it is all completely clear cut. I mean, they just cut everything in their way. Here's a photo of the mill in Jennings, Maryland. Log pond in the front, railroad to take away the cut lumber after they mill it. Here's a photo of Main Street in Jennings. Here is a hotel where Cortez lived, and also other people that came into town doing business would stay. I think it had 23 or 26 rooms, something like that. And then you've got company homes here. There's a church, and then this was actually the general store right here. Here's a photo of me and my mom. We visited Jennings, what was left of it, very little. The hotel is still there, but in pretty bad disrepair. But an Eagle Scout nicely made a sign here, "Welcome to Jennings, Maryland," established by the Jennings Brothers Lumber Company. So we got a little photo in front of the sign, which was nice. In West Virginia, they chartered over 30 miles of lumber railroads throughout that area. That mill could cut 150,000 board foot per day. Jenningston was a model company town, which housed the workers, had schools, churches, an ice house, barber shop, a warehouse, basically everything you can think of. Here's a photo on the left of all of the stacked timber ready to hit the railroad and go to market. Isn't that unbelievable? On the right-hand side, there is the Jennings Brothers Mill in Jenningston, where it was all cut. And again, you can see the tree line back here, completely barren, unbelievable. The company store had its own script. Employees would trade for everyday items at the store. BW and then his son, William Worth Jennings, were the primary managers of that operation. Logging under Jennings Brothers would conclude in West Virginia around 1907, and they sold the operations there for $1.4 million to the Laurel River Lumber Company, and with inflation today, that would be $50 million. Big bucks. Here is a photo of Jenningston back then, and you can see the mill is right here. The house that's in this photo to the right is all the way back here, teeny tiny. And you can see all the trees grew back in, which is beautiful. And now this home is a bed and breakfast there. And the family has visited a couple times, and the innkeepers are very nice and love to share the history of Jennings with the folks that visit. Here's a photo of a lumbering camp right near Jenningston, where they would you could see all the scrap here in the foreground. I mean, it's just, these people worked hard, really hard. Here's an aerial photo from the mountain of the house. There is the residence of B.W. and Ella Jennings, that now is the bed and breakfast. All these other buildings have been torn down or were ruined in a flood in the 80s. There is us on the porch of the home that is the bed and breakfast, and there's an old photo of it as well. Beautifully restored, it's gorgeous. Then Jennings Brothers goes international. C.H. Jennings of the firm Jennings Brothers of Lopez start for Venezuela, South America on the 24th of this month. Mr. Jennings is a president of a company recently organized to develop natural resources in that country. The companies, the Laura and Falcon Development Company and the Tocoyo Navigation Company, have been organized with each a capital stock of $1 million. Jennings Brothers are stockholders in both companies. It is said that these companies will engage in lumbering and commerce. Government of Venezuela has made valuable concessions to the companies to open inland commerce on the Orinoco River. Now, this is about I've found a couple articles. I don't think this ever really materialized. I have not found much about their Venezuela adventure, but there is records of them trying to start it. He obviously went there, according to this article, but our family doesn't really have any information on this, so I don't think it ever really happened. While finishing up operations in Lopez, Cortez and his wife Molly moved their home to Towanda, which is Molly's hometown, around 1906-1907. They purchased the home on 108 Main Street. The lot now is the parking lot of the Daily Review. It was eventually the home of an office of Dr. Tom Johnson. Many, I'm sure you know him and went to him. Here's a photo of the house in all its grand majesty. And again, unfortunately, is no longer there. Now the stairs right here are still there that go up into the parking lot, but that's it. It's a shame they tore it down. This was Cortez's carriage house there. He stored several different cars for all sorts of occasions. It really was a horse stable, but he put his cars there. It eventually became the Towanda Kindergarten, as many of you know, and was that for many years. And now it houses the children's library of the Towanda Public Library. Here's another photo, 1907, of the home on the left. And a photo of my grandmother, Molly Jennings, right here with her parents, Paul and Elizabeth, at the house on the porch. It would be a lovely addition if it was still there today. Another photo, 1914. On the street here parked, you've got Cortez's Stutz Bearcat automobile, one of, again, his many vehicles that he owned. I don't know anything about cars, but I think that's a nice one, probably. The property bordered 2nd Street and State Street here in Towanda. He donated the State Street lot and created a public tennis court. The borough erected a large engraved stone wall to honor him for giving that to the town, and here's a little article about the tennis court. Cortez H. Jennings, one of the town's most enterprising citizens, has just had a $3,000 concrete tennis court built. In a letter to the press, says everybody in Towanda is welcome to use it. He says he hopes it will prove a lasting benefit to the inhabitants of the town I love and the town wherein I hope to pass the remnant of my days. The court is 103 feet by 60, and it is located on State Street. So that was 1914 that he did that. The wall is still there. Here's a historical photo after he had it installed of the tennis court. Looks pretty fancy. You can see in the photo, here's the carriage house on the other side of the lot, and there's the house right there. Looks a little different today. Alongside his father, Cortez, his son, Paul Bishop Jennings, assisted the father in managing the Maryland operations, including starting his own enterprises. He was born in Lopez in 1891 and was the youngest child. He attended St. John's School in Manlius, New York, and then business school after that. Upon his return to Towanda, he went to work for his father at the Jennings stock farm while managing much of the lumber operations in Jennings, Maryland. June 10, 1915, Paul marries Elizabeth Hull Tate, and they have 2 children, Elizabeth Tate Jennings and Mary Alice Jennings, my grandmother. The summer of 1918, he enlists in the Army and makes sergeant first class, serving in World War I. He was very active in businesses of his own, including establishing his own lumber company, the Jennings Lumber Company, along with the Northern Maryland and Tidewater Railroad Company and the Towanda Coal Company of Maryland. He also established the Paul Jennings Stock Farm near Jenningsville, where he later donated part of that to become the Deer Park Game Preserve in Wyoming County. He also operated a large apple orchard in Wysox Township and in New Albany. He was a director of the Citizens Bank and a charter member of Towanda Legion Post 42, and also a charter member of the South Mountain Hunting Club and also president of the Quarry Glen Club. He was an avid outdoorsman. He died in 1954 and is buried at the Jennings family plot up at Oak Hill. Family business of lumbering, just like everyone else in the family. Imagine that. Eventually, he co-managed Jennings Brothers Lumber in West Virginia and married Clesta Kaiser on December 31st, 1906, and they have 2 children, Edwin Kaiser Jennings and William Worth Jennings, Jr. He was very active in politics and business in Towanda and Bradford County. He was the president of First National Bank of Towanda from 1920 to 1930. Also the director and treasurer of Towanda Waterworks. He was a director of Wayne Cut Glass Company and served a term as its president as well. He was a director of the Hartley Silk Mill Manufacturing Company and the Towanda Dye Works. He was elected to the Pennsylvania State House of Representatives in 1916 and served 2 terms there, 1917 to 1919 for Bradford County. He was owner and operator of Jennings Hurst Stock Farm in South Towanda, which we'll get into in a little bit. And he also owned Jennings Auto Parts Store in Towanda, Wellsboro, and Bath, New York. Worth died in 1967 and is also buried at the Jennings family plot up at Oak Hill Cemetery. Here is his official photo from Harrisburg when he was a state representative there. Very dapper-looking man. Here's a banknote from 1902 of the First National Bank of Towanda. You've got Worth's signature as president right here on the side. Kind of interesting thing to look at. Not only was Cortez business-minded, but he was very dedicated to investing in the progress of Towanda. He would invest in failing and struggling manufacturing businesses in order to save them, or he would look to bring new ones into town to create jobs and stimulate the economy. He was also civic-minded and very active in the Christ Episcopal Church, giving time and gifts there. He also served as a borough councilman and donated much to the Towanda community. He considered running for Congress in 1911, but he did not, so let's assume he was too busy. And to tell you just how busy Cortez was, here's kind of a list of all of the places he was involved with or owned in Towanda or Bradford County. He was president of Hartley Silk Company, owner and director of Towanda Dye Works, director of the First National Bank of Towanda, president of the Robert Packer Hospital, trustee of the Robert Packer Hospital for 25 years, served as junior warden of the Christ Episcopal Church, director of the Towanda Water Works, member of the Towanda Borough Council, board member of the Bradford County Agricultural Society, director of Bradford County Livestock Breeders Association, executive committee member and president of the County Farm Bureau, and chairman of the Republican Party in both Sullivan and Bradford County. Whew. I don't think these people slept. On top of that, having this busy life and an even busier retirement, he also was part of all these other companies outside of Towanda, Bradford County area. I don't need to necessarily read all of these, but I'll read a couple. First National Bank in Grantsville, Maryland, Postmaster Jennings, director of the Mahoopany Bridge Company, director of the Continental Credit Association headquartered on Wall Street, director of the Matheson Motor Car Company, director of the Southwestern Railroad Company, and he was an Electoral College presidential elector for William McKinley. Again, when did these people sleep? Through an investment by Cortez and his nephew Worth, Wayne Cut Glass Company opened a factory location here in Towanda. The company was headquartered in Honesdale, but opened a second factory here in 1910 in the old Tracy Shoe Factory building at the corner of Elizabeth Street and where the now former Dandy Mini Mart was located. Got a picture on the left here of the Tracy Shoe Factory. Here's an ad of Wayne Cut Glass, the salesman William J. McKenna taking glass to a hotel up in New York to sell the goods. And then you've got a photo here on the right of the Tracy Shoe Factory being torn down. Unfortunately, I don't have any photos inside the factory. It would have been neat to see it. Here is a 1911 insurance map of Towanda with all of the businesses. You've got Main Street right here and Elizabeth Street, and here is Wayne Cut Glass right on the corner. Cortez was president of the company, and Worth was first vice president. Traveling salesman for the factory is Lloyd Rosencrantz, who left the Corning Glass Company to come down and take the position. He traveled all over the country by train to Boston, Jacksonville, Chicago, and he would take very large trunks with him that had specially fitted pockets to put the glass in so it did not break, and then he would do sales pitches and shows to sell the pieces. 1914, the Daily Review states that there are 75 men employed at the factory. These glasswares were part of the later fine glass period known as American Brilliant Cut Glass, and mostly featured variety of floral designs, butterflies, and hobstars. The glass pieces include pitchers, vases, relish trays, candlesticks, among many other different pieces. On the right-hand side here is a vase cut by Wayne Cut Glass, and there's another example on the table up here, so you can go ahead and take a look after the presentation. Those are the only two pieces we have left in our family, and they are not marked on the bottom. They didn't mark the glass, unfortunately, but we know they're theirs. Here's a couple other photos of Wayne Cut Glass examples in a sales book. Let's see, 1911, they had $10,000 to $50,000 of capital stock in the company, pretty large. On top of the Wayne Cut Glass factory, they also own the Hartley Silk Mill, which was located in the lower high school parking lot on Lombard Street. There was also the Towanda Silk Mill Company, which is where the fire station is on Plank Road. They were not related. The company was closed, Hartley Silk Mill, but then reopened in 1915 after Cortez and E. Floyd Kaiser purchased and reorganized the company. The main manufacturing plants for the company were in Towanda and West Pittston, and then they eventually sold the mill to another silk manufacturing company. Here's an ad of the company with a couple other locations that they also managed. Times-Tribune in 1915 reports that the Hartley Silk Mill, which closed following the failure of the Hartley Silk Manufacturing Company 6 months ago, throwing many hands out of employment, will reopen on Monday. Cortez H. Jennings and E. Floyd Kaiser have succeeded in devising a reorganization plan, which has attracted several Towanda capitalists, and a new company to be known as the Hartley Silk Mill Company has been formed. This is one of the businesses that they were trying to save to kind of stimulate the Towanda economy and create jobs, and they succeeded for a while. Here's another insurance map to verify where the silk company was. Here's Lombard Street, which is also now Mill Street right here. And really, the shape of the mill is exactly the shape of the Towanda Lower High School parking lot. Here is a photo of it's just labeled Silk Mill Towanda, PA. I am not sure if it's Hartley Silk Mill or if it's the Towanda Silk Mill, but regardless, I threw it in here anyway. Cortez was close friends with Dr. and Mrs. Donald Guthrie, who also founded Guthrie Clinic. He served as president of the Robert Packer Hospital until his death. His nephew Worth Jennings and himself donated an ambulance to the hospital and also endowed a bed at the hospital. Here is a photo of the ambulance that they donated. It's up at the Guthrie for their Guthrie Gala celebration. They had a bunch of photos of historical records, and there is the ambulance.
Did the dog come with them?
Right? Actually, the dog's name is Rip Van Winkle, Dr. Guthrie's dog. Had to get in the photo. 1911, Cortez buys the 387-acre Scott Farm on the Towanda Flats and builds the C.H. Jennings Stock Farm. His nephew Worth bought an adjacent piece of land and built the Jennings Hurst Stock Farm. So the two farms were side by side, but they operated independently of one another. Here's a map showing the approximation of the farms. You've got 220 right here coming down. The Villa Senate is right here. This was Cortez's area, C.H. Jennings Stock Farm, and this side was the Jennings Hurst Farm owned by his nephew Worth. Like again, they were side by side, but the farms kind of looked like they were one because they were so close to each other. His farm goes from around the mouth of the Towanda Creek, crosses over Liberty Corners Road, and none of the farm, unfortunately, is still intact. The last standing silo is gone. That was near Liberty Corners Road. You could see it years ago, but that was it. The Jennings Hurst Stock Farm, though, was located on the other side of the airport. Like I said, these maps are me approximating because everything, the landscape has changed and it looks a lot different now. Here's a photo of Cortez's farm, the Jennings Stock Farm. Here is a photo of both farms side by side. You've got the Jennings Stock Farm that was owned by Cortez in the front here. And then you've got the Jennings Hurst Farm in the back owned by Worth Jennings. See how close they are and how much they just look like one big farm, but they were really separate. Here's a photo of the Cortez's side of the farm, and actually I will go back a slide here. You see this line of trees right here? This is the photo, then the other angle of the trees. The Daily Review wrote in 1922 that the Jennings Stock Farm had 887 acres, 14 dwellings, 1 large dairy barn, 6 outlying barns, 4 tobacco sheds, along with all personal property, crops, equipment, etc., and made up one of the most extensive farm properties throughout the eastern United States. Here's an aerial view of the Jennings Stock Farm here. You've got the main barn right here. And here is the road, essentially, that cut the two farms in half, again, to try to figure out where exactly this was is not my forte. Here's a photo of Cortez standing here with all of his horses. This is on the other side of Route 220, right next to Rob Hartman's house. You know where that is. 1916, the Carbondale newspaper reported that he just planted 250 English walnut trees, 100 Paragon chestnut, and 25 pecan trees on his extensive farms at South Towanda. He believes in combining useful with the ornamental. Very elaborate. Here's a photo of the Jennings barn, again, a postcard. Again, this is Cortez's stock farm. Mr. Jennings had other investments, buying from time to time the fertile flats along Towanda Creek. He became the owner of more than 1,000 acres of the best and most productive land in Bradford County. Later, he embarked in the dairy and stock raising business, establishing Jennings Farms, known where good horses and other stock are bred. His farm, with its fine stock and up-to-date buildings, for years has been among the show places in this vicinity. Evening Times, 1920. Here's another photo of his side of the farm. You've got the barn over here on the left. Got some people plowing the hay. Beautiful picture. Here's a scene from around the farm. Was this Jennings Hurst or Jennings stock? We're not sure. They all look the same. 1914, Cortez H. Jennings, local farmer and dairyman, purchased 8 Guernsey cows Saturday, the purchase price being $5,000. The stock comes from Frank S. Pierce Farm at Cranford, New Jersey, the latter having recently imported 144 of the finest cows attainable. Mr. Jennings' farm now includes one of the finest dairy stocks in this part of the state. And something Cortez did, he would allow farmers in Bradford County to breed with these really high-end cattle to kind of increase the stock of the county for free. Here is a photo of one of his prize horses named Rebus. He was really into purchasing Belgian draft horses, and that was his most purchased and favorite breed. Rebus here is a black stallion and is an imported French coach stallion weighing 1,300 pounds, according to the listing in the Canton Independent Sentinel in 1914. Here's a photo of Rebus on the farm with a driver, unknown driver, not sure who that is, but you can see the farm in the background. Granted, which farm is this? Again, they all kind of look the same. Now we're going to move to the Jennings Hurst stock farm, which was owned by his nephew, Worth Jennings. Here is the main dairy barn. And of course, most people know the connection here, but the Jennings Hurst Lodge was the summer home of William Worth Jennings, which is now the Villa Senna restaurant. He would come here in the summer, but he had a house year-round just down the street on Main Street in Towanda, so I'm not sure how much of a getaway that was. In 1919, the large Jennings Hurst stock barn burned, along with other farm collateral, and in a very big, massive fire. Now, the Jennings stock farm was not harmed, just the Jennings Hurst barn and farm. George Dayton Sr. would eventually purchase and incorporate the farm as Fox Chase Farm, which I know many of you are aware. And then Bern Van de Wert then owned it, and now the McNeil family owns it, which is where Farmer Fred's is located. Here is a postcard of Jennings Hurst stock farm. Beautiful.
Michelle,
Yes.
I do want to
Oh, no, go ahead.
go back a
Oh, sure.
picture. That's where the airport hangar is.
Oh, okay, good to know. Airport hangar is there. See, I learn something new every day. The only standing building that I'm aware of is the barn owned by Rob Hartman, which is Fox Chase Woodworks and Restoration, which was the Jennings Hurst Quarantine Stable and Old Hay Barn. And you can see from this artist rendition here, this looks identical, and that, I think, is the last standing barn, besides a tobacco barn that was torn down a while ago. That's, I think, is it. But Rob's done a great job restoring it and, you know, has his business out of the barn. Here is a postcard of that other photo of the two farms next to each other. July 1920, Cortez heads down to Jennings, Maryland to sign the contractual paperwork for the company to go ahead and sell it, and he becomes ill. He suffers a stroke at the hotel, and then taking a train back to Towanda as soon as he's able. An article from the Scranton Tribune tells the story beautifully. While seated in the lobby of a hotel at Jennings, Maryland during the middle of July, Mr. Jennings, overcome by an attack of paralysis, was stricken speechless and made his condition known to a guest of the hotel seated near him by writing on a slip of paper. He was immediately taken to a room and given medical attention. On that night, when Mr. Jennings was stricken, he wrote the following on a slip of paper: "I am paralyzed, I can't see, but please don't notify my wife." The Reverend Thomas J. Botswick of Jennings, Maryland, was astounded by having a man visibly ill and palsied place a scrap of paper in his hand while the two were seated in the lobby of the hotel. The minister notified the clerk, and the man was later identified as Cortez H. Jennings. It was learned later that he drove to Jennings, Maryland from Towanda shortly before he handed the note to the minister. Physicians were summoned, and after treatment, he allowed the attaches of the hotel to notify his wife. His speech, which was also affected, returned, and he told of his plight. So he heads back to Towanda after having this stroke, and he dies on September 16th, 1920 in Towanda. After his death, 2 Farm Bureau agents, D.K. Sloan and H.N. Cobb, purchased the farm from his wife, Mary Jennings. Here's a photo of the Jennings family plot up at Oak Hill Cemetery, where many of these folks are buried. Here's a quote from George Donahue's History of Pennsylvania about Cortez. "As has been said, Mr. Jennings possessed a many-sided mind, and his interests in life were versatile. Life for him could never grow dull and monotonous. All of his business interests were not centered in lumbering. He was a generous patron of many concerns: silk mills, banks, railroads, waterworks, and many other manufacturing plants, in all of which he was a director and in several of which he held the office of president. Conservative in methods, progressive and energetic in spirit, fair in his dealings, and a good judge of human nature, these elements, combined with a rigid sense of honor, made him a man worthy to lead others. He probably had more money invested in Towanda business interest than any other citizen." Aside from all of Cortez's business dealings, he did have a little fun. Here, the family went on a cruise, actually a 6-month cruise in 1912, visiting many countries, and took a couple of friends and family along. So Cortez is here in Egypt, in front of the pyramids on a camel right here. Pretty cool. Here's his wife, Molly Jennings, and the Kaisers are right here, sitting, as well as other family members and friends. Again, I always keep this into perspective. 1912 is when the Titanic happened, so luckily they weren't on the Titanic. Oh, really? Oh.
When they were in,
Oh, go right ahead, Jenny.
when they were in Egypt, they heard about this new ship, and they tried to get passage, and it was booked.
Oh, wow.
So they came back, with my grandfather always.
Oh, I didn't know that. So she's stating, if people can't hear her, that they tried to get on the Titanic, but it was booked.
And my great-grandparents are employed, and it goes up there.
Right here. Well, and lucky they didn't, otherwise I would not be here, and neither would she and all these other people in this. Here is a photo of them in Monte Carlo, France, in front of the casino, again, having some fun on this tour. They're down here in the Grand Canal in Venice in a gondola. Here's Cortez on his horse. He absolutely loved horses. The whole family loved horses, so he was always, riding around on horses, even with the invention of automobiles. Here's a photo of Cortez in his younger years and his wife Molly in her later year. Very fancy, elegant people. And with that, my presentation is concluded. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about Cortez Jennings and his impact here in Towanda. I'm happy to take any questions at this time, so go ahead and just raise your hand. Yes, go ahead.
How did they infect this to the lumber mills? What? Was it diesel and what kind of steam engines? What made the lumber mills able to build?
Yeah, I mean, they used water at first, because that's why they were on the creeks. Yeah, and then eventually would switch to diesel. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, they would use steam generated by whatever, and eventually would install a couple of different, initially they had one saw, where it just was one blade going round and round. Then they installed double gang saws that would cut stuff faster and quicker, which is why they were able to increase the output. Mhm. Mhm.
What was the one named Nell?
Mhm.
Why would she have been working, or she was just there with his family? What did the women do, and what was she doing, married?
Yeah, I mean, she went to school, but she met BW while they were out lumbering, so I'm not sure how they met exactly. Maybe other family members know. But yeah, I mean, the women just kind of did all the home and civic duties. They didn't, they weren't really participating in the lumbering. I know it was a lot of information, so thank you for bearing with me. Yeah. Oh, Mom, you know the answer. How old was Cortez when he died? I don't do math. 62, 63? Yeah, he was pretty young, yeah. Oh, it's amazing he did all of that in the short life, because again, I just don't know when these people slept or did anything, because again, you don't have phones, internet, you're taking trains. I mean, at one point, they didn't even have the railroads in the woods to drag the logs out. They were all dragging them out by hand and sliding them down in the snow. I mean, this was very hard work that again, I don't know how these people did this. Mhm. Go ahead.
Do you have any idea why things didn't last, like in Lopez and so?
Yeah, I mean, they ran out of wood, basically. They cut all the timber, and they did try to secure a couple more tracks, but it was not that great of lumber, so they just decided to move on.
Do you know when, like it said at one point, it was the conservationists, but do you know when I know in the beginning they didn't think of
Yeah, they just cut everything. Yeah, I mean, that was standard for all logging companies. They just clear cut everything, and these were old, virgin timber, gigantic hardwood forests that have never been cut. Now, granted, they're all growing back now. Now they're not, hundreds and hundreds of years old, but they'll get there eventually if they're left alone. So, yeah, they just went in and cut everything. But they used all the resources. They would use the bark to make tan leather. They would sell that to the tanning companies. So, they weren't wasteful. And of course, they had all these other manufacturing enterprises making, the broom handles and the clothespins. That was all scrap from cutting the boards. So, yep. Mm-hmm.
Do you know where the Jennings Auto Parts store was here?
I don't, but maybe somebody in the crowd does. Jennings Auto Parts Store. Oh, in Troy too? Wellsboro, Towanda, and Bath, New York was the three, yeah. Anybody know where Jennings Auto Parts Store was? I want to say it was like somewhere where the Papa V's is, somewhere down through there, I feel like. But have to look at an old insurance map to find out. All right, well, I'll be up here for questions. Please take a look at the table, and thank you for coming.